betrayed. And I just saw like those wounds, those fears that's already happened to you. You've been embarrassed. Someone said something you said in secret and it came out. And so I just want to encourage you that you're home. You're home. You're safe. You're home.
I feel like this one also is for multiple people, but just this feeling of anxiety going back to school and just meeting new people and being in an environment that is so different. God's just telling you that He is with you and that He's walking right alongside you, and He's already been to the places that you're going, but to really lean into Him in this time of maybe being anxious or fearful of what's to come, going back to school, but He's holding your hand and He's looking right at you and saying that we're going to do this together. So just to encourage you guys that He's with you all the time.
All right, can we hear it for him? That was awesome. So, one of the fun things, in my opinion, about our youth group is how the leaders, we all get a chance to grow in new things, right? To be stretched in new ways. I'm growing in preaching all the time and getting better, hopefully, at that, and fine-tuning, fine-tuning. My desire is to grow in those ways, and that's just one of. But we as leaders, we're all on a journey. You know what I mean? From here to the day any of us die, we all get this chance to continue to grow in relationship with Christ, and what that looks like as well is growing as a person, growing in maturity, growing in selflessness, growing in love, learning how to lay ourselves down so that Christ lives through us, love lives through us, joy, peace, all the things of God pour forth from us. So you guys did awesome. Super proud of you guys. Yeah, this is super fun. We're gonna talk a little bit about stories. Who had a funny story from their family that they'd like to share? Funny story? Anybody? Is it appropriate? Appropriate one? You got a funny one?
I mean, he just talks about being
Oh, okay. Probably not funny ones. Nice.
I had a funny one.
Yeah?
But it was from my dad and his brothers. So when they were younger, they would together without talking about things ahead of time. Like they had multiple things happen where they suddenly had this, like people asking another one about a lie that another one told. So one of them said that we have a sister that's buried in the backyard. And
wow.
They never had a sister, so no one's buried in the backyard. But so then these two friends went to my dad or one of his brothers at the school and was like, "Do you have a sister buried in the backyard?" And yeah, just like without them talking about it. So they're like, "Okay, we're gonna talk to your mom." So they went to their house and they went up to my Grammy and they're like, "Miss Nelson, is your daughter buried in the backyard?" And she was like, she started thinking, "Oh, they must be talking about our dog that passed away and that we buried in the backyard." And so she says, "Yes." These girls are freaked out.
Wow.
The dog.
That's really funny. That's pretty good. That's pretty
Did
good.
that ever get cleared up or
No.
investigated?
No.
Got arrested. Spent Christmas in jail.
I'll share.
To this day.
I have a kind of a funny random story. It's pretty short, but my family loves to tell it because it's at my expense, of course, But I was this little boy. I don't know. I was probably like 7 or something. How old are you when you learn how to ride a bike? Does anybody? Like 5 to 7. I was gonna say 5. I seemed a little young. I was probably.
Wait, you said 3?
3 is that's. Yeah. The next Lance Armstrong right there. That's 3 years old, riding a bike.
Almost 4.
So I was like between like 5 and 7, I don't know, but I was learning how to ride a bike, and my family, we had this driveway that was really intense. It was a great house, it was the house I grew up in, but it was like this main road, and then the driveway, it was, the house was down below, right? But the whole property was built on this sort of like hill, you know, but it was, anyway, so there's this main road, and then the driveway came down, and it came down pretty steep, and then there was another entry and exit to the driveway over there. So it was really beautiful. But anyway, there was these berry bushes, a lot of them, like a wall of berry bushes, and I was learning how to ride my bike, and my dad. The reason this story comes to mind is because I got prophesied over like less than a week ago, and somebody was like, I see you like learning how to ride a bike, and you're like a little kid, and God's just right behind you, and he's carrying you along, you know, and it's just like, you know, that's like God's just working with you as you grow up, you know, he's teaching you how to do new things. And I was like, oh, that's a really sweet word. Can I tell you about the time I learned how to ride a bike? And he goes, yeah. So I go to ride this bike, right, and I've been kind of nervous, because I don't know, I guess I was just nervous, but my dad puts me at the top of the hill, and he's like, I'm gonna run alongside you, you know, you just gotta pedal, and like, you know, just keep your balance. And so I'm like, okay, all right, Dad, I trust you, Dad, I trust you. So he puts me at the top of the hill, and he lets me go, and I start going. You know what I mean? I got my little wheels, my little pedals, and I'm like, I'm doing it, Dad. I'm doing it, Dad. And he goes, good job, son. And I was like, he sounded really far away. And I didn't have the courage to look back, but my dad was still at the top of the hill. And I'm going towards some berry bushes, and I hadn't learned how to use the brakes, and so I kicked my feet up, and I threw my hands up in the air, and the bike went straight into the berry bushes, and I got stuck, like in a web, like I couldn't move because there's thorns everywhere, you know, and I was trapped inside the berry bushes, and my dad had to come and like peel me out, you know, and I wouldn't talk to him, I wouldn't say a word, and I was crying, and
What did your dad say?
he said, you want to try again?
Is that
Yeah. And
Spider-Man?
the funny, yeah. The funny part of the funniest part, I guess, the part my dad loves to tell the best, is that I refused to get on a bike for like a year. I was like so done with riding a bike. Anyway, he was like, that's the best part, it's so funny. I'm like, it's done. I'm like traumatized. Anyway, God's healing wounds. He's healing wounds. I prophesied over that Father God, you know? Carried on my back.
He came right to that bush.
Right into the, yeah.
Wasn't concrete.
We gotta move on. You have a funny story?
Yes.
A funny story? Is it bike riding?
Yes.
Can you tell it in 30 seconds?
Yeah, my dad was bike riding down the thing and with his sister, and he fell down the thing and it was rocks. And he started to up.
Funny.
He was fine though, but he thought he broke his leg, so he goes, hey sister, I think I broke my leg. She goes, suck it up, and made him walk all the way home.
She's like, but now he can't remember any of our names.
Sister.
And he was like 8. And he was begging his sister to carry him. She goes, suck it up, and ran over his bike. His bike was broken, and he had to carry it and live all the way home.
That's pretty intense. Do you have a story too?
I wanted to change my mind, but I'll just
You changed your mind on this one?
Okay, so me and my grandpa, like, we bike to the beach, and, you know, it's 14 miles round trip, so it gets really hot, and I had, like, a head cold.
Is this like on this trip?
Yeah. It was, like, a couple weeks ago. I was, like, really stuffy, and, like, 3 bugs had hit my face on the bike ride back, because we went in the evening, and so a lot more bugs were out, and... the back of my throat. And it's just gone. Like
Is it a big one?
I
Oh, you
tried to
swallowed
get
it.
it out.
Got
No,
it.
it was gone.
Nice.
And so I had to stop and I got some water. And then we go bike riding the next day again. And a giant butterfly, like this big, it's like black. It doesn't have like anything else on it. Like lands on me, and like thankfully no one was down because those like steep. They're like, really? Like I like was going like so crazy, and
Oh my god.
now I'm afraid to go bike riding again because literally and then I went again and one went up my nose.
You should probably stay off bikes.
That's what I'm saying.
I think, yeah.
I didn't wear masks before that. It's like, how could you breathe? It's like,
Mm.
maybe they're onto something.
You know where there won't be bikes? Is at camp. Don't you guys think Abby should come to camp with us?
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be so great?
Oh, that would be so great.
That would be mountain bike.
She's on the fence. But you guys can convince her.
I'll be her
If you
Um,
want
All right. So, stories. Stories are fun. If you guys didn't know or notice, stories are like everywhere. Stories are all like, I mean, every TV show, Netflix, like Amazon, Hulu, it all revolves around stories and telling stories. Stories are in advertising. Did you guys know that? Did you know that social media, like job roles, like if you're like a social media person for a company, it's called the storyteller. What's the story that company's telling? You're literally a storyteller for that company. It's crazy. Stories are everywhere. Stories are everywhere, and stories forever have been everywhere. Okay, so stories are really important. And I was actually thinking recently. I was sort of like, I don't know, reflecting on this like question that I often ask myself, and I thought it would be a good question to sort of share with you guys. It's just a helpful one. It's a helpful one in terms of how you see yourself. It's a helpful one in terms of how you make decisions. So, you guys all good? Oh, okay. It's like, so the question is this. This is gonna be really short. Like, it's not even a message. The question is this. What is the story? What is the story that you want to tell? What's the story that you want to tell? When you're 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, we don't tend to think about the decisions that we make being a big deal. But what's crazy is that the decisions that we make, they actually form habits. And the habits that we make, in a way, they form a person. The decisions that we make form habits, and the habits that we make form a person. Just go for it. Just get it open. Just pour them out on your lap. Get ready to go. So stories are a really big deal, and it's important that we see ourselves. Check it out. Whether you do it intentionally or unintentionally, whether it's a conscious thing that you do or it's just subconscious and it's behind the scenes, you never really think about it. Either way, you human beings will see themselves. You and I will see ourselves as the main characters of a story. There's a story that's being played out. Charlie, are you good?
Yeah, I thought I heard my mom call her name.
That's okay. Probably not. So, recognizing that your life is going to play out like a story, and recognizing that in the story, you make decisions. We following?
I'm just going in the way.
Alright, let's save stuff like that. We'll save it for the end. That's okay. We don't have a ton of time. We want to worship a little bit too at the end. So, in the story of your life, you're going to make decisions. And the decisions that you make will be stories that you look back on that you're either proud of or you're not. You're either going to be proud of the story that you tell, or you're not. And the joy is that we all have the capacity in Christ to be proud of the story that we tell. In Romans 7, if you have your Bible, who has a Bible? Pull it out. Go to Romans 7. Which verse?
Hey, I blanked out of my head.
That's fair.
I like the numbers.
I'm just.
Romans 7, verse 21. Go to 21. Check it out. Paul, this guy that wrote this, his name is Paul, and what he's doing right now is he's explaining through a letter to a group of people. He's explaining to them a principle in life, and as he explains it to them, he is setting them up for the good news of the gospel, right? To know that Jesus has come to save us means we have to know what he come to save us from, right? If you don't think that you have a problem, then you don't think that Jesus died for any reason. Does that make sense? So helping people understand, like, oh, I have a need. I had a need. I have a need, right? And then recognizing God has fulfilled that. Has fulfilled that need. Now everybody knows that they have a need because on the heart of every person is written a conscience. Christian or not. Helping people recognize, some people would say like, oh, like, you know, I'm gonna avoid that rabbit trail. Okay, Romans 7, verse 21. It says this, I have discovered this principle of life, that when I want to do what is right, everybody say, what is right?
What is right?
I inevitably do what is wrong. Everybody say, shoot. Shoot. I love God's law with all my heart, but when there's another power within me that is at war with my mind, this power makes me a slave to sin that is still within me. He says, oh, what a miserable person that I am. Who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? And then he answers. He's just setting it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He says, thanks be to God. The answer is Jesus Christ our Lord. So you see it how it is. In my mind, I really want to obey God's law, but because of a sinful nature, I'm a slave to sin. God has set us free from this sinful nature. He set us free from this sinful nature, so that though we might be tempted, we don't have to say yes. You're not tempted beyond what you can bear. This is what a life free from sin looks like. This is a life by the Spirit. That you can live free from sin. That is made possible through Christ. It's made possible through Christ. Why is this important? Because before, you might have been a captive so that you almost couldn't be proud of the story you tell. This translation says it more simply, but in another translation, he basically says this. He says, what I want to do, which are maybe good things, right? What I want to do, I don't do. And what I don't want to do, I keep doing. He's explaining the problem of humanity every human being has ever found themselves in. Like, I'm sitting on the couch watching Netflix. I gotta turn this thing on. I gotta go to bed. I said that 30 minutes ago. Why am I still here? You know what I mean?
The show's just too good.
It's a cliffhanger.
This problem of not doing what we want to do and doing what we don't want to do, God set us free from. So he's actually set us free to live the stories we always wish we could. He set us free to live the stories we always wish we could. In the Bible, you can look at most any character. They didn't know they were in a story. They didn't know. Any character, unless they've processed life the way I'm describing to you right now, But they didn't know that their story was going to get written in a book for us to read for thousands of years. They didn't know. They didn't know. I've had 7 cars in my life. Okay, I'm 25 years old. I've had 7 cars.
Maserati.
That's a car for every year since I graduated high school.
Are you serious?
Yes. I've had 7 different vehicles in my life. Okay. Why have I had 7 vehicles? I don't know.
Because you're blessed.
God has walked me through kind of a crazy journey of different car testimonies and radical, weird, wild stories that have played out in my life. Okay? I'm going to tell you guys one really quick one, okay? Are we ready? Are we ready? Okay, so this is car number. This is car number 5. Okay, car number 5 of 7. So I have at this moment car number 3 of 7 in the story. Okay, it's a Toyota Corolla. Everybody say yay. Yay. It's very bland and boring. I have a Toyota Corolla, and because of a previous car testimony, this car is completely mangled. It's I was hit by a semi, so the side of the car is just completely torn up. You know how semis have those bolts on their tires that stick out?
Oh, yeah.
So a semi hit me like that, like Mad Max, came up alongside me, lifted my tires on the side, right, and tore all the way through, blew out the rim. I had a homeless guy in my car because I was taking him to a shelter. I delivered him. He was demonized. He was oppressed or possessed the day before. I prayed for him. He got delivered, and then I picked him up the next day, got him in my car, and while I was driving, and the semi comes and destroys my car.
Scarred.
This is a true story, okay? I've lived this story. Okay, so my car is destroyed, right? That same period of time, I got told I'd get no financial aid, which is $3,000 I was anticipating, and it was because of an error in their system. And they were like, "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do." So they're like, "You're not gonna have any money for the next 6 months. Also, your car's destroyed, so you can't drive, so you can't make money, right? So I can't work, and a whole bunch of other things." Okay, the guy that drove the semi, he was saying it was my fault, and so that meant, which is not true. He just was scared that he was going to get in huge trouble from his company, so he was saying it was my fault. Anyway, so the whole thing's kind of crazy, right? That story lasts for 2 months, and I'm struggling. I literally can't even make ends meet. I drove a car on a spare donut tire. Don't take this, don't do this, okay? This is 100% a miracle, what I'm about to share with you, and really dangerous. It was really bad idea and dangerous. Do not do this, okay? Do not, please. Don't say, "Hey, Jake did it one time, my youth pastor." When you're 21 and have your car and you're living in college, don't be like, "My youth pastor did," okay? Okay, I drove this car on a donut tire, which is a smaller one. So my car was leaning forward when I would drive it because it was lower. And it's skinnier. You're not supposed to drive more than 50 miles, and you're not supposed to drive more than 50 miles an hour, okay? I drove well over 50 miles an hour, and I drove for 2 months.
Wow.
So that's a solid, almost 2,000 miles. You're not supposed to go more than 50. Okay, don't do that. Don't do that. Anyway, at the end of this story, there was a 24-hour period at the end of the 2 months where God, it started the night before, and within 24 hours, God checked every box. Financial aid got cleared. Insurance said, "Nah, it's definitely the truck driver's fault." Police officer, yeah, cleared it. I asked with the insurance, I was like, my car was worth about $2,000, right? They gave me 4, right? Amazing story, right? Okay, so this is my 3rd car. I'm driving that car for a couple years. I drove it for 2 years after that. It kind of looked like flames, you know what I mean? On the side, like bullet hole flames. It was
Oh my God.
I don't know. pictures. So I was driving that car for about 2 years, and I'm sitting on my couch one day, and God says, hey, I want you to pray for your car. Well, like he didn't say that, I guess. He brought the car to my mind while I was praying. And so I was like, okay, so I start praying for the car. I'm like, yeah, God, just thank you for my car. I just pray, just live long and prosper, like let's go. It's been 3 years, he's had a rough life, but let's do it, we'll keep going. And then I kind of moved on, and then God was like, no, I want you, like he brought the car up again. And I was like, okay, what do you want? What's going on, God? And I heard him say, it's time. And I knew what that meant. I had $2,000 from the last story, and I had saved up some money, so I had money in the bank, and I was ready to go get a new car, so I was stoked, right? He said it's time. I was only driving it just to make the most of it. I have money in the bank, so I'm stoked, right? All right, so I pray. He says, I want you to pray for whatever you want. Like dream big, okay? All right. So I pray for a blue Subaru Outback.
Oh my goodness.
A blue Subaru Outback. I prayed for a blue Subaru Outback because I just thought they were the coolest little adventure mobiles. There's a lot of them in Oregon. Daniel's mad at me. He said I should have prayed for a Ferrari. I could have prayed for a Ferrari, but I prayed for a Subaru Outback. Anyway, so I prayed for this blue Subaru Outback. Okay, and I prayed for about, a week. And then I start to feel like, Subarus, they don't get the best gas mileage, and it's not actually the smartest car. It's what I want, but it's not the smartest car. So I changed my prayer, I think I should pray for something more financially responsible, right? How exciting does that sound? So I changed my prayer, and I prayed for a white Honda Civic. Everybody say, wow.
That's awesome.
So exciting. A white Honda Civic. Very boring. It's just like every car you've ever seen ever on the road. That's a Honda Civic. You've probably seen, it's just the most bland, cheap car ever. So that's what I changed my prayer to, okay? Is that what God told me to pray for? No, what did he tell me to pray for?
A car.
Told me to dream big, told me to pray for what I wanted. Okay. Fast forward, I find a car. I spend all my money on the car. I drive to Oregon, because that's where the car is, because I have family up there, and they scoped it out. They took it to a mechanic. They checked it out. They're like, it looks good, all the things, right? I spend all my money on this car. I fly to Oregon so I can drive it back. And as I drive it back, I make it about 2 hours. And it breaks down. And it's completely worthless.
Oh my God.
Lost all my money. So I call the guy, and he's like, yeah, sorry, you're done. I can't help you. Okay? All right.
Car 6.
Yeah. So, So I actually made, it really wrecked me. It was a really hard time processing through that difficulty. I felt jaded. I felt hurt by God. How many of you guys know it's possible to feel hurt by God? It's possible. It's not, God's not a man that he should sin or do wrong, okay? But it is possible to feel offended by God. Jesus said, blessed is he who's not offended by me. You can be offended by God. You can be offended by Jesus. Not in that God's wrong or has done wrong, but you can be. Anyways, I spent a while where I was hurt by God. And then I decided I'm going to be done with this. And I fought and fought and fought to be free from that hurt. After I fought and fought and fought, I finally encountered freedom at a worship night. I felt free. I experienced my heart lifted of its load. I was no longer full of sorrow and pain. I felt free. As that happened, the next day I get a call, and my friend goes, hey, I saw you at that worship night last night. And while I saw you worshiping, I felt like God told me to give you my car.
Wow.
It's a blue Subaru. Blue Subaru Outback. Yeah, 99. I wanted one of the older ones because I thought they looked cooler. And this was the 1999 blue Subaru. And I was like, that's crazy, right? That's wild. I'm not going to go into the next story, but I will say the very next story that followed, the very next time I found myself in a hard situation, specifically with a car, where I needed $2,000 so that my car could get fixed, or else I was going to be carless. And the money came in. I had 2 different people just say, hey, I felt like God told me to give you $1,000. In that story, the very next time it came, I posted on Facebook, because I'm old. I posted on Facebook and I wrote this long post and I said, hey, watch what happens. God's going to provide for me. I said, stay tuned. I'm going to post again on Facebook and you're going to hear the testimony of God giving me all this money and I'm going to get my car fixed. Or I'm going to get a new car. But God's going to provide something new for me.
I got it.
Forever 21. It's all good. Well, you want to cruise outside and take it? Phone call?
Where is it?
I don't know. You can carry the bag out though.
What?
There you go. You can call them back or whatever you need. There we go. They called back. The very next time I found myself in that kind of a situation, I posted and started to brag about why was I able to do that? I put it in the post. I've seen this story before. I know how it turns out. I've seen this movie. I know how it ends. I've been in this situation like 11 times at this point. This is my 6th car. I know how this story ends. For each one of us, you'll find yourself in a situation where you're going to have to make a decision. And it might feel like a big deal and it might not feel like a big deal. But how you live, the way that you respond in that situation, the way that you respond with that decision, is writing a story of your life. When I see myself, I choose to see myself. Stephen and Rebecca, you guys want to jump up here? When I see myself, I choose to see myself and the story of my life, not as one of the stories. You know, there are stories in the Bible that like Christians aren't proud of. Like Christians kind of like try to oh yeah, we just don't, like to talk about that one. Like we're not super proud of the way that they responded. You know what I mean? The people of God, like, wasn't the best response there. When I see myself as a character in the story God's writing with my life. And I want to see myself as the David that stood up to Goliath and not the brothers who were scared in the army. You understand what I'm saying? Who are you in the story? Are you Peter who gets out of the boat or the other 11 who are scared in the boat? Who are you in the story? Are you... Are you Jonah? Are you Jonah when he gets called by God, he literally books it? And then even to the end of the story, gets swallowed by a whale, gets spat back out. He still has to preach the message God told him to, but he does it begrudgingly, and he doesn't have a good heart about it. I just prophesy that is not any of you, in Jesus' name. That is none of you. Do not see yourself in that story. That is not you. Just declare that over you. That is not you. But who are you in the story? I'm going to prophesy. As for us, God, we're one of the faithful ones. Gianna is one of the faithful ones. In this room, God, we have sons and daughters who stand up to Goliaths. In this room, God, we have Noahs who hear you say to do something crazy, and they're willing to do it. just because you said so. In this room, God, we have Abrahams who hear you say to go to some foreign land, and they go, what? You say, yeah, I want you to go and preach the gospel. I want you to go and establish a nation. I want you to go and whatever it might be. God, we have sons and daughters in this room. God, help us to own a story that we're proud of. That we're set free from this law of sin and death, where we don't do what we want to do and we don't do what we want to, or I might have said the same one twice there. God, you've set us free from sin. You've set us free from this law and bondage. Yeah, so I just pray in Jesus' name that every single one of us would see ourselves as obedient sons and daughters. We would see ourselves as faithful ones because it's how you see us. You see us, God, as just full of hope. You're full of hope for us. And even if you've made bad decisions or you've chosen wrong a handful of times or you've had a series of wrong decisions, God sees you still as one of the ones who can turn in a moment. He sees your heart. You can turn. You can have a pure heart before Him. You can be, like David, a son or daughter after His own heart, even if you've made bad decisions. God, help us to see ourselves this way. Help us to see ourselves this way. Help us to live for you and you alone. And if we're ever faced at a crossroad, God, help us to ask the question, what's the story I'm going to want to tell? And then help us, God, to have the courage to make that decision.